At a strained family dinner, my conceited sister-in-law abruptly rose and shouted, "You took my wallet, you dirty thief." I denied it, but she smirked, dug into the bag next to me, and triumphantly fished out her wallet. "See? I knew you were the one," she sneered, her voice oozing with mockery. The whole table turned to me in shock, but I couldn't stop laughing. Okay, gather round, because I have a story that still makes my blood run cold and then, weirdly, makes me want to scream with satisfaction. Imagine, for a second, being publicly branded a thief by your own sister-in-law, at your parents' 40th wedding anniversary. Can you even picture the betrayal, the humiliation? But here's the kicker, I knew she was going to do it. Every single agonizing moment. This isn't just a story about a bad night, it's about 6 years of psychological warfare, all leading up to one explosive moment. My name is Gabriella, I'm 32, a graphic designer here in Chicago. And my sister-in-law, Vanessa, well, she made it her life's mission to tear me down, especially at family gatherings. You need to understand Vanessa. From the moment my brother Eric introduced her to our family 6 years ago, she was on a mission to be the queen bee. She comes from serious money, her dad owns a chain of luxury car dealerships, and she never, ever let anyone forget it. At first, I genuinely tried with her. I wanted my brother to be happy, and if Vanessa was his choice, I was all in. I invited her to lunch, suggested shopping, even offered to help plan their wedding. But each time, Vanessa found these subtle ways to cut me down. She'd comment on my simple apartment, ask if my clothes were from a discount store, or suggest my graphic design career was cute, but not, important like her corporate job or her father's empire. The worst moments, though, always happened at family events. Like 3 Christmases ago, when she accidentally spilled red wine all over a dress I'd spent weeks designing and making myself. Or last Thanksgiving, when she loudly announced how brave it was of me to come to dinner alone again, while everyone else had partners. At my niece Lucy's baptism, she told our extended family that my gift for the baby was thoughtful, considering what you can afford. I swallowed my pride. I forced smiles through gritted teeth. I kept the peace. Not for Vanessa, God no, but for Eric, who seemed completely blind to his wife's behavior, and for my sweet niece, Lucy. Lucy, who is still innocent and loving, and the thought of causing drama that might affect her relationship with any family member kept me silent for years. My parents, David and Marie, are in their late 60s. They're total peacekeepers, the kind of people who believe family harmony is worth almost any personal sacrifice. Dad, a high school principal for 35 years, Mom, a nurse, they raised us to believe forgiveness was strength, and family bonds were sacred. So when Vanessa's behavior became impossible to ignore, they just gently changed the subject, or somehow separate us. Eric, my older brother, has always been caught in the middle. We used to be so close. He protected me from bullies, taught me to ride a bike, was my confidant. But after Vanessa? He changed. He started canceling our monthly sibling dinners, making excuses. When I did try to gently bring up Vanessa's treatment, he'd get defensive. "You're just jealous, Gabs," he'd say. "She just has a different communication style. You need to try harder to understand her." It felt like a punch to the gut every time. My younger sister, Julia, was my only true ally. 3 years younger, she's always been the family rebel, speaks her mind, consequences be damned. She saw through Vanessa immediately and had no problem calling her out. This, naturally, made her Vanessa's second favorite target, though Julia cared far less about the jabs than I did. "You know what your problem is?" Julia told me once. "You still care what that witch thinks. Stop giving her the power." Easier said than done, when every family event became a psychological battlefield. The events that led to that infamous dinner started 3 months earlier. My parents announced their 40th anniversary, a huge milestone. I volunteered to organize a dinner at Salvatore's, their favorite upscale Italian restaurant where they had their first date. I poured weeks into planning, custom menu, a playlist of meaningful songs, arranging for their oldest friends, family photos for a slideshow, beautiful custom invitations. Of course, Vanessa had to insert herself. First, she called the restaurant behind my back to change the reservation time, claiming it was more convenient for everyone, without checking if that was even true. Then, she contacted guests to suggest a different dress code. She even ordered a completely different cake than the one I'd carefully selected based on my parents' favorite flavors, claiming her choice was more sophisticated. When I confronted her, she played innocent. "Oh, I thought we were planning this together," she'd say with wide eyes. "Eric told me you probably needed help since you have so little experience with this kind of upscale event." Eric denied saying it, but also refused to ask Vanessa to back off. So, I adjusted. I compromised. I kept my focus on making the evening special for my parents. By the day of the party, I was absolutely drained from navigating Vanessa's interference, but determined not to let it ruin the celebration. Salvatore's was perfect. Tucked away in Little Italy, it was the same charming spot from 1983. Giovanni, the owner, whose father had served my parents back then, helped me reserve their most romantic corner table and created a special menu. The private dining room glowed with soft amber light. Red and white roses, Mom's favorites, adorned each table. The scent of garlic, fresh bread, and tomato sauce filled the air. I arrived 2 hours early, personally placing framed photos of my parents' marriage on a memory table by the entrance, alongside my gift, a hand-illustrated family tree tracing their lineages back 4 generations. Guests started arriving at 7 o'clock. My parents walked into applause. Mom, stunning in a navy blue dress. Dad, beaming in his suit. The joy on their faces made all the stress melt away until Vanessa arrived. She and Eric were 15 minutes late because, I later found out, Vanessa had insisted on changing outfits 3 times. She swept in wearing a dramatic red designer dress, frankly, too formal for the occasion, diamonds glittering everywhere. Little Lucy trailed behind, in a miniature version of her mother's outfit, looking uncomfortable and tugging at a tight collar. "So sorry we're late," Vanessa announced loudly, air-kissing my mother's cheeks. Traffic was dreadful, and I simply had to make sure we looked appropriate. Some of us understand the importance of presentation at significant events. Her eyes flickered to my simple black cocktail dress, chosen specifically not to draw attention from my mother. I saw Mom's slight frown, but true to form, she just thanked Vanessa and complimented Lucy. I'd carefully planned the seating. My parents at the center, their oldest friends flanking them. Eric, Vanessa, and Lucy were at one end, Julia and I at the other. It was meant to keep Vanessa and me at a safe distance. But Vanessa had other plans. As everyone moved to their seats, she declared, "Oh, there must be a mistake. As the eldest son's wife, I should be seated next to Marie. Families should be closest on such an important occasion, don't you think?" Before I could intervene, she moved the place cards, displacing Helen, my mother's best friend who'd flown in from Arizona. The ripple effect forced several other guests to shuffle, creating confusion and awkward glances. I caught Julia's eye across the table, and she subtly shook her head, a clear warning, "Don't make a scene." Throughout the appetizer course, Vanessa dominated the conversation. She'd just been promoted to marketing director at her father's company, though everyone knew it was a position created specifically for her. "It's just so rewarding to be recognized for hard work," she said, looking pointedly at me. "Not everyone understands the dedication it takes to succeed in the corporate world. Some people choose easier, more creative paths, which is fine, I suppose." My father, ever the diplomat, tried to include me. Gabriella just completed a major branding project for that new tech startup. "What was it called again, sweetheart?" Before I could answer, Vanessa cut in. "Oh, David, speaking of technology, did I tell you about the new partnership I negotiated with Tesla? Daddy says it's the biggest deal our company has ever made." The conversation continued like this, with Vanessa interrupting, redirecting, and subtly undermining anyone else's contributions, especially mine. I focused on making sure the service ran smoothly, quietly conferring with staff. It was during one of these moments, as I returned to my seat from speaking with the headwaiter, that I noticed something odd. Vanessa had left the table briefly, claiming she needed to freshen up. As she returned, I saw her reach into her oversized designer handbag and carefully tuck something into an inner pocket. From my angle, I caught a glimpse of what appeared to be a second wallet, different from the red leather designer wallet I'd seen her use earlier when she'd ostentatiously left an overly large tip for the coat check. My first thought was, maybe it was an old wallet. But something about the furtive way she glanced around, that slight tightening around her eyes. I knew that look. Her plotting face. It sent a chill down my spine. For a moment, I considered confronting her. But this was my parents' night. Any accusation I made would sound paranoid and petty without knowing her full plan. And then, a small voice inside me whispered, sometimes the best response to a trap is to let it be sprung, but on your own terms, so I watched. I waited. Maintaining a pleasant expression, my mind raced. I noticed that after returning to her seat, Vanessa positioned her large handbag on the floor between her chair and mine, despite a perfectly good hook under her table. It was notably within reach of my chair. Another detail. Deliberately staged. Throughout the main course, I engaged with other guests, but I kept a peripheral awareness of Vanessa's bag. I saw her check it several times, ostensibly for her phone or a tissue, but always with that calculating expression. Whatever game she was playing, she was setting the stage carefully. And for the first time in our long history of conflict, I felt one step ahead of her. The tension in the room escalated. What should have been a celebration felt like navigating a conversational minefield. Uncle Robert, who never quite read a room, brought up the family cabin in Michigan. So, David, have you decided who gets the cabin in the will? Not to be morbid, but I was talking to my financial advisor. A heavy silence fell. The cabin, a source of countless happy memories, was also a source of tension. Vanessa had made no secret of wanting to renovate it into a proper lake house and claim it. We haven't made any final decisions, Dad said carefully. That's not really dinner conversation, Robert. But Vanessa saw her opening. Well, since it came up, Eric and I have actually been discussing some wonderful ideas for modernizing the cabin. It needs substantial work, and we'd be willing to invest in those renovations if, well, you know. She smiled sweetly. It would be such a special place for Lucy to grow up visiting, just like Eric did. The implication was clear, it should go to them because they had a child. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. The one that always appeared when Vanessa leveraged her status as the mother of the only grandchild to gain an advantage. The cabin is perfect as it is, I said, trying to keep my voice light. The whole point is its rustic charm and family history. Modernizing it would erase what makes it special. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. That's such a typical response from someone resistant to positive change. The cabin has plumbing from the 1960s, Gabriella. Surely even you can see that needs updating at minimum. There's a difference between necessary updates and completely changing the character of a place, I replied. Mom, sensing the brewing storm, quickly changed the subject to Julia's recent promotion. But Vanessa wasn't finished stirring the pot. Speaking of careers, she interjected after letting Julia speak for barely 30 seconds. I heard that graphic design jobs are being rapidly replaced by artificial intelligence. Gabriella, are you concerned? It must be so stressful working in a dying field. All eyes turned to me. Classic Vanessa. Actually, I replied, maintaining a calm smile, human creativity and understanding of emotional resonance are exactly what AI cannot replicate. My client list is growing because companies recognize that connection. But thank you for your concern about my career. The conversation continued to bounce between pleasant reminiscences about my parents' marriage and Vanessa's pointed barbs. By the time dessert was about to be served, I felt emotionally drained from the constant vigilance required to navigate her attacks. Excuse me for a moment, I said, standing up. I need to check with the kitchen about the anniversary cake. In truth, I just needed a moment of peace away from Vanessa's calculating gaze. I went to the restaurant's small outdoor patio, empty in the chilly evening air. Taking a deep breath, I leaned against the stone balustrade and looked up at the few visible stars. In that quiet moment, I considered my options. I could continue the pattern of the last 6 years, deflecting her attacks. I could finally call her out. Or I could find some middle path that protected my dignity without ruining my parents' celebration. As I stood there, I remembered the strange behavior with the second wallet. Whatever she was planning, it was unfolding tonight. The thought sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the breeze. After about 5 minutes, I knew I needed to return. As I walked back, I saw Giovanni, the owner, speaking with a waiter, gesturing toward our private room. He caught my eye and gave me a quick, reassuring nod. I'd explained the family dynamics to him during planning, and he'd promised to help. That small gesture of support solidified my resolve. I returned to find dessert being served, a delicate tiramisu, Mom's favorite. As I took my seat, I noticed immediately something had changed. Vanessa was sitting straighter, an almost imperceptible smile playing at her lips. Eric looked tense, staring at his dessert. My father was mid-story about their honeymoon, but Vanessa was barely pretending to listen, her eyes flicking between me and her handbag, still positioned between our chairs. I had just taken my first bite of tiramisu when Vanessa suddenly gasped, loudly, cutting off my father mid-sentence. "My wallet," she exclaimed, her hand flying to her chest in an exaggerated gesture of distress. "I cannot find my wallet." All conversation ceased. Every head turned. Vanessa made a show of searching her bag. "Are you sure you brought it?" Mom asked, concerned. "Did you check your coat?" "Of course I brought it." Vanessa snapped, then quickly composed herself. "I had it right here. I paid the coat check with it. Someone must have taken it." She started looking frantically under the table, asking others to check near their seats. I noticed she was careful to direct everyone's attention away from her own handbag, where I suspected it was hidden. "Perhaps you left it in the restroom," Helen suggested. "No, no," Vanessa insisted, her voice rising dramatically. "It was right here in my bag. It has all my credit cards, my driver's license, even pictures of Lucy that cannot be replaced." As the search expanded, guests standing up, I saw Vanessa's eyes repeatedly dart to me, gauging my reaction. I maintained a neutral expression, helping to look around my area, even as I felt the trap beginning to close. "Wait," Vanessa said suddenly, her voice dropping to a theatrical hush. "When did you leave the table earlier, Gabriella? And where exactly did you go?" The question hung in the air like a thundercloud. Some people looked confused, but I knew exactly what she was doing. "I went to the patio for some fresh air," I replied evenly. "And then I spoke with Giovanni about the cake." "Why, do you ask?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed, and I saw the satisfaction in them that told me I'd walked right into her script. "Isn't it strange," she said slowly, "that my wallet disappears right when you leave the table? And you were gone for quite some time, weren't you?" The atmosphere shifted instantly. I could feel the uncomfortable tension as guests realized what she was suggesting. My mother looked stricken, my father confused and distressed. Julia was halfway out of her seat, fury etched on her face, but I caught her eye and subtly shook my head. This was between Vanessa and me. "Are you suggesting I took your wallet?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "That's a serious accusation, Vanessa." She didn't respond directly. Instead, turning to the table at large. "Has anyone seen my wallet? It's red leather Prada with a gold clasp, very distinctive and obviously valuable." No one had, of course. Because I was increasingly certain it was exactly where Vanessa had hidden it, waiting for her dramatic reveal. The private dining room fell completely silent. Wait staff, sensing the tension, had discreetly withdrawn. Even the soft Italian music seemed to dim. Vanessa stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor, a sound that cut through the silence. Every eye was on her. Her expression transformed from worried search to righteous anger. "You," she said, pointing directly at me, her voice rising to a near shout. "You stole my wallet, you filthy thief." The accusation hung in the air. So outrageous, so unexpected, that for a moment, no one reacted. My father was the first to recover. "Now, Vanessa," he began, his principal's voice making a rare appearance. "That is a very serious allegation to make without any evidence." But Vanessa wasn't deterred. She was fully committed. Her face flushed with what appeared to others as genuine outrage. "I have suspected for years that things go missing when Gabriella is around," she continued. "A pair of earrings from our guest bathroom, money from Eric's wallet, even Lucy's birthday gift card last year. I never said anything because I wanted to keep the peace, but this is too much." I felt like I'd been physically struck. Not only was she accusing me tonight, but retroactively blaming me for other alleged thefts I'd never even heard about. I glanced at Eric, expecting him to defend me. But he was staring at the tablecloth, his face unreadable. "That is absolutely not true," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I have never taken anything that does not belong to me. Not tonight and not ever." My denial seemed to fuel her performance. She turned to the table at large, her expression now one of sad vindication. "You see how she lies? Always so perfect, so innocent. Gabriella, the graphic designer. Gabriella, the devoted daughter. Gabriella, who everyone loves. But I know what she really is." Guests shifted uncomfortably. Some looked confused, others embarrassed. My mother had tears in her eyes, and my father looked older than I'd ever seen him. Humiliation burned through me. Anger pulsed in my temples at the injustice. But beneath it all, a strange calm was forming. I knew what was coming. I'd seen the setup, recognized the trap. While part of me wanted to leap to my feet and scream, another, stronger part, whispered, "Patience. Let her play out her hand completely." "I do not appreciate being called a thief or a liar," I said, keeping my voice low and controlled, especially not at our parents' anniversary celebration. Vanessa's eyes gleamed with triumph. She clearly interpreted this as a weak defense. And then, she made her move, the one I'd been waiting for. "Well, if you're so innocent," she said with a smirk, "you won't mind if we check your things." Before I could respond, she reached down toward my feet, where my tiny clutch purse sat. I'd deliberately chosen a small evening bag that could hold only my phone, lipstick, and keys, to avoid anything unnecessary. "That's hardly large enough to hide a wallet," Julia pointed out sharply. "No," Vanessa agreed, straightening up with a predatory smile. "But this is." She reached for the large tote bag that had been sitting between our chairs. The one I knew belonged to her, but that she now implied was mine. "That's not my bag," I said calmly. "Oh?" Vanessa raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Then whose is it?" "It's been sitting right next to you all evening." Before I could respond, she made a show of opening the tote and dramatically reaching inside. The look of satisfaction on her face as her hand closed around what she was seeking made my stomach churn, even though I'd anticipated this exact moment. "Well, well, well," she said, her voice dripping with mock surprise as she triumphantly pulled out her red Prada wallet. "What do we have here?" "My wallet. In your bag. See? I knew it was you." The collective gasp from around the table was audible. My mother covered her mouth, eyes wide with shock. My father looked stricken, torn between his instinct to believe his daughter and the seemingly irrefutable evidence. "Gabriella." Eric finally spoke, his voice a mixture of confusion and disappointment. "How could you?" That hurt more than anything else, the immediate assumption of my guilt from my own brother. 6 years of Vanessa's influence had eroded his faith in me so completely that he didn't even question this absurd scenario. The triumph in Vanessa's eyes as she surveyed the shocked faces was unmistakable. She had orchestrated her moment perfectly. In her mind, she had finally won, humiliating me so thoroughly I'd never recover. What she hadn't counted on was that I had seen it coming from the beginning. The shocked silence stretched into eternity. My family and their friends stared at the red wallet in her hand, then at me. Confusion, disappointment, discomfort painted their faces. The perfect anniversary celebration had derailed spectacularly, and I was now the apparent villain. And then I did the last thing anyone expected. I laughed. It started as a small chuckle, then grew into full, genuine laughter that I couldn't have suppressed if I tried. The sheer absurdity, the elaborate trap she'd set, and the fact that she thought she'd finally outmaneuvered me, it all struck me as hilarious in that moment of tension. My laughter broke the frozen tableau. Vanessa's triumphant expression faltered, confusion and then anger replacing it. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded. "I just caught you red-handed stealing my wallet, and you're laughing." I took a deep breath, composing myself, though a smile still played on my face. "I'm laughing, Vanessa, because that is not my bag. And we both know it. That's your bag." I pointed to the designer tote. "You placed it there deliberately. And you put your second wallet inside it earlier this evening." Her face paled slightly, but she rallied quickly. "What are you talking about? This is obviously your bag, and my wallet was inside it." "Actually," I said calmly, "if you look inside that bag, you'll find it contains things that belong to you, not me. Perhaps your makeup compact with your initials, or the specific brand of hand sanitizer you always carry, or maybe even the little notebook where you write down perceived slights from family members to bring up later." I'd been observing her for years, noting these small details. The look of shock that flashed across her face told me I'd hit close to the mark. "You're trying to confuse everyone," Vanessa insisted, but her voice had lost some conviction. "The fact remains that my wallet was in this bag next to your chair." "Yes," I agreed. "In your bag, which you carefully positioned to appear as if it might be mine, after I watched you place a second wallet inside it when you returned from the restroom earlier." Gasps and murmurs spread around the table as the implications sank in. My mother's expression shifted from distress to confusion, my father's from disappointment to careful consideration. "That's absurd," Vanessa spluttered, a note of panic entering her voice. "Why would I carry two wallets?" "An excellent question," I replied. "One that I asked myself when I saw you tuck something that looked remarkably like a wallet into that bag earlier. At first, I thought perhaps you'd found an old wallet in your purse. But then I noticed how carefully you positioned the bag between our chairs and how you kept glancing at me throughout dinner with that calculating look you get when you're planning something." I turned to the table at large. What Vanessa didn't realize is that I've spent 6 years studying her methods. I know when she's setting up a situation. I've just never had proof before. "This is ridiculous," Vanessa cried. "You're making up stories to cover your theft." "Actually," I said, "there's a way to settle this definitively." I turned toward the back of the room where Giovanni had been quietly observing. "Giovanni, would you mind sharing what we discussed during the planning for tonight's event?" Giovanni stepped forward, his professional demeanor tinged with discomfort. "When Miss Williams was organizing this celebration, she asked about our security measures. I informed her that after a theft last year, we installed discrete security cameras in all our private dining rooms. They are primarily for the protection of our guests' belongings, but they record continuously." The color drained from Vanessa's face so rapidly that for a moment, I thought she might faint. "You knew," she whispered, staring at me. "You knew there were cameras, and you let me." "I knew there were cameras," I confirmed. "What I didn't know was exactly what you were planning. But when I saw you hiding something in that bag, I suspected it might be something like this. I just didn't think you'd go quite so far as to publicly accuse me of theft." Eric had been listening with growing horror. He stood up abruptly. "Giovanni, can we see this security footage right now?" Giovanni nodded. Of course. We can access it in my office immediately. I don't think that's necessary, Vanessa said quickly, her voice high and tight. This has gotten out of hand. It was obviously just a misunderstanding. But Eric was already moving toward Giovanni, his expression grim. I want to see the footage. Now. I remained seated as Eric, my father, and Giovanni left the room. The atmosphere they left behind was thick with tension. Vanessa remained standing, her hands gripping the back of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. My mother looked between us, her expression unreadable. Julia had a small, satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The minutes stretched on interminably. No one spoke. Guests fidgeted, wishing they could leave, but trapped. Finally, the door opened and Eric returned. His face was set in hard lines I had never seen before, his eyes cold as they fixed on his wife. The cameras show everything, he said, his voice flat. They show Vanessa taking a wallet from her purse, placing it in the tote bag, and positioning the bag between the chairs. They show her checking repeatedly to make sure Gabriella hadn't noticed. And they clearly show her removing the wallet during her dramatic accusation. Every eye in the room turned to Vanessa, whose face now showed genuine fear. Eric, she began. I can explain. Don't, he cut her off, his voice sharp as a blade. Just don't. We'll discuss this at home. The silence that followed was deafening. I had waited years for this moment of vindication, for someone in my family to finally see Vanessa for who she truly was. But now that it had arrived, I felt no triumph. Only a profound sadness for my brother and my niece. I stood up slowly, drawing all eyes to me. Mom, Dad, I said gently. I'm so sorry that this happened during your celebration. This evening was supposed to be about your 40 years of love and commitment, not about any of this. My mother's eyes filled with tears, but they were different from the ones I'd seen earlier. Oh, Gabriella, she said. We're the ones who should be sorry. We should have seen what was happening. I moved around the table to embrace her. And as I did, I felt the weight of years of silent suffering begin to lift. Whatever happened next, the truth was finally out in the open. The remainder of the dinner proceeded in a strange, subdued atmosphere. Vanessa sat rigid in her chair, barely touching her dessert, while Eric maintained a cold silence beside her. Lucy, sensing the tension but not understanding its source, grew increasingly fussy until Julia quietly offered to take her outside for a walk. My parents made a valiant effort to salvage the celebration, but the emotional undercurrent was impossible to ignore. Their closest friends rallied, creating pockets of genuine warmth amidst the awkwardness. As the evening drew to a close, guests departed with a new awareness in their eyes. Some offered quiet apologies for having doubted me. Others simply squeezed my hand in silent support. Helen, my mother's best friend, pulled me into a tight hug. I always knew that woman was trouble, she whispered fiercely. Good for you for standing your ground. My father looked shell-shocked. The lines in his face deeper than I'd ever seen them. As he helped my mother with her coat, I saw him place a protective hand on her back, as if the evening's events had reminded him of the preciousness and fragility of family bonds. When only immediate family remained, my father finally spoke directly about what had happened. I owe you an apology, Gabriella, he said, his voice heavy with regret. We've seen the tension between you and Vanessa for years, but we told ourselves it was normal in-law dynamics. We never imagined it went this deep. My mother nodded, tears welling again. We should have protected you better. We were so focused on keeping the peace that we didn't see who was really disturbing it. It's not your fault, I assured them. Vanessa is extremely skilled at presenting one face to some people and another to others. And I never wanted to force anyone to take sides. Eric, who had been standing silently by the door, waiting for Vanessa to return from the restroom, now approached us. I need to talk to you, he said to me, his voice rough with emotion. Alone, if that's okay. We stepped out onto the same patio where I had collected myself earlier. The night had grown cooler, and I wrapped my arms around myself against the chill. Eric looked out at the city lights for a long moment before speaking. "I don't even know where to begin," he finally said. "I feel like the world's biggest fool." "You're not a fool," I said gently. "You're someone who wanted to believe the best about the person you love. There's nothing foolish about that." He shook his head sharply. "Stop being so understanding. I don't deserve it. For years, I've dismissed your feelings, defended her behavior, even accused you of being jealous or difficult. And all this time..." His voice cracked. "All this time, she was deliberately trying to hurt you. To drive a wedge between us. I had imagined this moment of validation countless times. But now that it was here, I found no satisfaction in my brother's pain." "What are you going to do?" I asked quietly. Eric ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking exhausted. "I don't know. I need to think about Lucy. About what's best for her. But I know I can't just pretend this didn't happen. What Vanessa did tonight, it wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. It was calculated, cruel. It makes me wonder what else she's capable of." Before I could respond, the door to the patio opened and Vanessa emerged. Her makeup had been freshly applied, but it couldn't hide the redness around her eyes or the tight, defensive set of her mouth. "The car is waiting," she said to Eric, her voice brittle. "Lucy is tired." Eric looked at her for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression, a hardening I had never witnessed before. "Take Lucy home," he said. "I'll get a ride with my parents or Gabriella. We need some space tonight." Vanessa's composure slipped, revealing a flash of panic. "Eric, please. We need to talk about this." "Yes, we do," he agreed. "But not tonight. Tonight, I need to process what I saw on that security footage." For a moment, I thought Vanessa might argue further, but after a tense silence, she simply nodded stiffly and walked away. The sound of her heels clicking on the hardwood floors faded as she went to collect Lucy. After she left, Eric turned back to me. "I am so sorry, Gabs. I know those words aren't enough, but they're all I have right now." I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "They're enough for tonight. The rest we can figure out as we go." When we returned inside, my parents and Julia were waiting. The five of us, our core family unit, without Vanessa's divisive presence, stood together in a moment of wordless reconnection. Then Julia broke the silence with her characteristic directness. "Well, that was the most dramatic anniversary dinner in history. Congratulations, Mom and Dad. You'll definitely remember this one." Surprisingly, this broke the tension. My father chuckled. My mother smiled through her tears. And even Eric managed a weak laugh. We gathered our things, thanked Giovanni profusely for his discretion and help, and made our way out into the night. As we stood on the sidewalk, saying our goodbyes, my mother pulled me into a fierce hug. "I am so proud of how you handled yourself tonight," she whispered. "You showed grace under incredible pressure." "I learned from the best," I told her, holding her tight. As I drove home alone later, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. The satisfaction of finally having the truth exposed was tempered by concern for my brother and niece. Family dynamics were complicated, and I knew tonight's revelations would have far-reaching consequences. But for the first time in 6 years, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The constant need to defend myself, to question my own perceptions, to walk on eggshells around Vanessa, all of it was shifting. The truth had a power of its own, and once revealed, it could not be unseen. When I reached my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and poured myself a small glass of wine. Sitting by the window, overlooking the city, I raised the glass in a silent toast to my parents, 40 years of marriage, to truth, and to the uncertain but hopeful future of our family. In the weeks and months that followed, our family entered a period of painful but necessary transformation. Eric moved into our parents' guest room, temporarily explaining to Lucy that Daddy needed to help Grandpa with some projects. It was a flimsy excuse, and the perceptive 4-year-old clearly didn't fully believe it, but it provided a gentle buffer while the adults sorted through the debris of Vanessa's deception. Vanessa, for her part, cycled through a range of strategies to manage the fallout. First came tearful apologies and claims she'd suffered a momentary breakdown due to stress. When those fell on deaf ears, she attempted to minimize her actions, suggesting everyone was overreacting to what was merely a misguided prank. Finally, when those approaches failed, she resorted to what I suspected was her true nature, cold calculation. Hiring an expensive divorce attorney and threatening to limit Eric's access to Lucy if he pursued separation. That final move backfired spectacularly. The security footage from Salvatore's, which Giovanni had preserved, provided compelling evidence of Vanessa's deliberate attempt to frame me and damage my reputation. When Eric's attorney suggested this demonstrated a pattern of manipulative behavior that might be relevant in custody considerations, Vanessa's aggressive stance softened considerably. By the 3-month mark after the dinner, Eric had filed for divorce and moved into his own apartment. He and Vanessa established a tentative co-parenting arrangement with Lucy spending equal time with both parents. The transition was hardest on Lucy, who couldn't understand why her family had suddenly fractured. I made a special effort to maintain my relationship with my niece, arranging regular outings to the zoo, children's museums, and parks when she was with Eric. Aunt Gabby, she asked me during one of these outings, as we shared ice cream on a park bench. Did Mommy do something bad? The question caught me off guard, and I chose my words carefully. Grown-ups sometimes make mistakes in how they treat each other. Your mom and dad are working through some grown-up problems, but they both love you very much. That will never change. Lucy seemed to consider this seriously, then nodded with the simple acceptance children often show for complex situations. Daddy's sad a lot now, she observed, but he smiles more when you visit. My relationship with my parents also evolved. My father, the lifelong educator, took the situation as a personal failure. I should have seen what was happening, he told me during a private conversation. I observed students and their dynamics for 35 years, but I missed what was right in front of me in my own family. Dad, I reminded him gently, Vanessa fooled a lot of people for a long time. That was her specialty. My mother, ever the nurturer, focused on healing the family bonds. She instituted weekly family dinners, minus Vanessa, where we gradually relearned how to communicate openly. These gatherings were awkward at first, but over time, they became a sanctuary where authentic connection could flourish again. Julia, true to form, approached the situation with her characteristic directness. I've been waiting 6 years to say I told you so, she announced to Eric at one of these dinners. But now that I can, it doesn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. Her honesty somehow broke through some of the tension, and Eric actually laughed, perhaps his first genuine laugh since that night. As for me, the vindication I had longed for came with unexpected emotional complications. For years, I had channeled my frustration with Vanessa into my work, using graphic design projects as an outlet for the emotions I couldn't express within the family. Now that the truth was known, I found myself at a creative crossroads, unsure where to direct that energy. The initial weeks were a roller coaster: relief, anger at the years of gaslighting, guilt over my brother's pain, anxiety about the future. There were nights I lay awake, replaying every interaction with Vanessa, seeing with new clarity the calculated nature of her behavior from the very beginning. During this period, I sought help from a therapist, Dr. Catherine Torres, who specialized in family dynamics and emotional recovery. Her guidance was invaluable. What you experienced was a form of psychological abuse, she explained during one session. Having your perceptions repeatedly denied or dismissed can make you question your own reality. That's called gaslighting. And recovery takes time. With Dr. Torres's help, I began to rebuild my sense of self-trust. I reconnected with friends who had drifted away during the Vanessa years, many of whom had sensed something was wrong but hadn't known how to help. I focused on self-care, hiking along Lake Michigan, taking a pottery class, reading for pleasure again. Professionally, I channeled my renewed energy into my design business. I had always been good at my work, but now I found a new level of confidence, proposing bold concepts that pushed boundaries. To my surprise, these were often the ideas that resonated most strongly. Within 6 months, I had landed 2 major contracts with national brands and hired my first employee. The most profound healing, however, came through an unexpected channel. About 4 months after the anniversary dinner, I received a message from a woman named Sophia, who introduced herself as Vanessa's former college roommate. She had heard about the incident through mutual acquaintances and reached out because, as she put it, "I've been where you are." Over coffee at a quiet cafe, Sophia shared her own experiences with Vanessa during their university years. The patterns were strikingly familiar: the careful cultivation of allies, the subtle undermining, the elaborate setups designed to make Sophia appear unstable or unreliable. The conversation was both validating and healing. "It took me years to trust my own perceptions again after living with her," Sophia confessed. "But you know what helped the most? Finding others who had been through similar experiences, knowing I wasn't alone." Inspired by this connection, I started a small, private support group for people recovering from relationships with manipulative individuals. We met monthly, sharing stories and strategies for healing. Through helping others, I found my own path forward, transforming pain into purpose. As the 1-year anniversary of that fateful dinner approached, I reflected on everything that had changed. Eric was dating again, cautiously, a kindergarten teacher he'd met at one of Lucy's school events. My parents seemed lighter, their relationship strengthened by weathering the family crisis together. Julia had been promoted at the hospital and was considering a master's degree. And me? I had learned lessons that would shape the rest of my life. I had learned the value of patience, of strategic thinking, of waiting for the right moment rather than reacting immediately to provocation. I had learned that sometimes the most powerful response to manipulation is simply allowing the truth to reveal itself in its own time. Most importantly, I had learned that standing in your truth, even when others doubt you, is not selfishness but self-preservation. For years, I had silenced myself to keep the peace, believing that harmony required my silence. Now, I understood that real harmony can only exist where truth is honored and respected. The last time I saw Vanessa was at Lucy's 5th birthday party, a carefully orchestrated neutral event at a children's play center. We acknowledged each other with tight nods from across the room, but didn't speak. I noticed she wore a mask of cheerful politeness that never quite reached her eyes, and I wondered if she had already found new targets for her manipulations. But that was no longer my concern. I had reclaimed my voice, my family, and my power. The journey through pain had led to a place of authentic strength, and that, perhaps, is the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest growth comes through our deepest wounds. The very experiences designed to break us can become the foundation for building a more genuine, powerful version of ourselves, if we have the courage to face them honestly and the wisdom to transform them into something meaningful. Tell me, what would you have done in my shoes? Have you ever faced someone so manipulative, and how did you handle it? I really want to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you for listening. Take care.